Welcome to Module 3. In the previous module, we built the foundation for our code review assistant by connecting Azure DevOps to n8n. Now in Module 3, we will take it one step further. Instead of scanning entire repositories, we will extract just the pull request file changes directly from Azure DevOps using REST APIs. The focus of this module is targeted analysis. We will focus only on the files that actually changed, making our automation faster, smarter, and far more efficient. Now the question is, how do we know which files actually changed in a pull request? We can do it by following these 5 steps. Before I dive into each of these steps, the overall idea here is we are going to call Azure DevOps REST APIs to get what we want. So we'll be calling 3 of the Azure DevOps REST APIs, which we will see momentarily. So the first step is we are going to get the latest changes in the PR. Think of this as asking Azure DevOps, hey, can you show me the latest updates in this pull request? Under the hood, we are making a GET request to Azure DevOps REST API. But we are not going to hard code anything here. If you look at this endpoint URL, you'll see that we are going to be plugging in the organization name, project name, repository ID, and pull request ID. So the APIs we are hitting here gives us something called as iterations. Think of iteration as checkpoints in your pull request journey. Every time a developer pushes a change to a pull request, whether it's a tiny typo fix or a complete rewrite of the logic, Azure DevOps creates a new iteration. For example, let's say a developer opens a pull request with a new feature. That is iteration number 1. Then QA finds a bug and the developer fixes the code, pushes the code, boom, that's iteration 2. Then someone suggests renaming a variable or updating a comment. That becomes iteration number 3. So with step number 1 here, where we are getting the latest changes in the pull request, what we are actually doing is we are grabbing the most recent snapshot, the latest iteration. This is super important because it helps us pinpoint what actually changed, and that's what we will feed into our OpenAI model in the next module. So once we finish step number 1, which is getting the latest changes in the pull request, the next step for us is to get the latest iteration ID. Because Azure DevOps senses all the past iterations for a pull request, we are only interested in the most recent one where the latest code changes live. Step number 3 in this process is we will be calling this REST API seen here, and we'll be passing the organization, project name, repo ID, and the pull request ID, and the iteration ID that we got from step number 2 to Azure DevOps REST API, and we'll be get the list of files that's part of our pull request. So if your pull request has 10 files, this particular step will return the list of all the 10 files. So at that point, we will go to step number 4, and we will extract the path of each of the files. And the final step in this workflow is we will get the content of each of the file, and that will be the outcome of module number 3. While explaining the workflow for module number 3, I showed you that we'll be making 3 calls to Azure DevOps REST APIs. Azure DevOps REST API requires proper authentication for the requester to access pull request data. So there are different authentication mechanisms that can be set up at Azure DevOps, but for this demo we'll be using Basic Auth with personal access token from n8n. So during the demo I'm going to show you how to set this up and how to start using it in n8n. Now that we know what we need to build in module 3, let's get started. So I'm logged into my instance of n8n, and as I said in the previous module, if you don't have an account with n8n, You can start with the free trial and then you can start building along with me. So in the previous module, this is where we left off. So I created a webhook. I showed you how to set up a service hook in Azure DevOps so that you can start connecting Azure DevOps with n8n. And then I added a set node in the previous module to get the pull request metadata. Let's continue down this path and let's add some additional workflows to pull the contents of the pull request. So the first thing I'll do is I'm going to search for a node called HTTP request. So this is the node that n8n offers to make calls to the REST APIs. So I'm going to add this here, and the method is always going to be get because we were requesting data, and in the URL I'm going to paste this URL, right? So this one it's hitting the dev.azure.com, and we are going to be passing in the organization, project name, repo ID, and the PR ID. Let me expand it a bit so that you can look at it. And all these data is coming from the output of the previous node. So I'm going to show you a test, and you're going to see how these values, how the input is being read, and what will be the output of the step. So the one thing you have noticed here is anytime you make a request to Azure DevOps REST API, it needs to be properly authenticated. And as of now, the authentication is none, but I'm going to select generic credential type, and then in the generic auth type, I'm going to select Basic Auth. And as of now, we don't have any credential. So the next step is I'm going to show you how to create a credential. So for us to create a basic auth credential, we had to first set the we have to get the personal access token from Azure DevOps. So let's go to Azure DevOps. I'm going to click here, and I'm going to select personal access token. And in here, I'm going to click new token. I'm going to give it a name. So I'm going to call it ADO n8n auth user. That's the name I'm going to give. And then in the scope, I'm going to select read write scope on the code, and then click on show all scopes and scroll down to and look for pull request. So in the pull request threads, select read and write and hit create. So this is the minimal scope that you need to set up for this exercise. So let's click create, and it's going to give you the auth token, the personal access token. So we need to copy it. If you don't copy it now, then you're going to lose it. So you just have to come and create a new one if you fail to copy this. So I copied this. Now the next step for me is go back to n8n, click create new credential, and the username doesn't matter, it can be anything. I can even just say pat user, or I can give something that's relevant to this. So I'll say ADO n8n auth user, and in the password I'm going to paste the one that I copied from Azure DevOps, which is the personal access token. And I can set some name here so that it will show up in the drop down. So I'm just going to give the same name, ADO n8n auth user, and I'm going to hit save. And at this point I have created the credentials, so I can just close this, and I can select the user that you just created. That should be it for this step. So let's go back, let's hit save. Before we start testing the newly added node, I just want to change the name of this. So I'm just going to go here, select this. I'm going to call it get latest pull request changes. Okay, I'm back to my editor. I'm going to hit save so that the name is saved. And the next step is for us to test it. So I'm going to go to Azure DevOps, and I'm going to create a new pull request. You can give any title you want. I'm just going to say test module 3. And before I hit create, I need to make sure my workflow is listening to this because I'm using the test URL. So I'm going to click on this execute workflow, go back to pull request, and going to hit create. So now I can come back here just to see if my workflow is triggered. There you go. So we see the workflow was triggered, and we can even double click to see the input and output. So what you see here is n8n made a call to the Azure DevOps REST API, passing in the organization name, project name, pull request ID, repo ID, and it got the list of all the changes that is in the pull request. So the next step for us is, as I mentioned earlier, this step is going to pull all the iterations, but I'm interested only in the last iteration. So the next step for us is to get the latest iteration ID, which is what we will do next. So the next step in this workflow is to get the latest iteration ID. So for that, I'm going to add another set node. You saw me add the set node in module 2, so I'm going to do the same thing again. So just click on this and look for set and select the set node. In here, we are going to select manual mapping, and I'm just going to add some fields. So I'm going to click on add field. The first thing I'm going to add is the organization, and the organization should be inside the get PR metadata because we executed this step earlier, so it will already have the value. So I'm just going to drag and drop here, and I'm going to add some additional fields here. One for project name. I'm just going to drag and drop the project name here. Let me do it again. Okay, so the next step is I'm going to add the repo ID. Repo ID is here, so I'm going to drag and drop the repo ID. And then the next step is to add the pull request ID. So I'm going to call it PR ID, and the PR ID is here, so drag and drop. The next step is to add a field called iteration ID. So the iteration ID, it's not going to be here, so I'm just going to copy and paste a value, an expression, and then I'm going to explain what it is. Okay, so let me explain what I did with the iteration ID. So basically what we are telling in this step is we want to pull the latest iteration ID from the pull request. So this expression that I'm adding here first checks to see if there is a value array, and if the value array exists, then it does a calculation on the last item's position using length -1, and finally it gets the latest iteration ID from the list of changes. So that's what this particular step is doing. And when I perform the test, you're going to see the output, and you'll see that it was returning an iteration ID of 1, because as of now I just have only one iteration, and that's what you're going to see. Okay. Let's hit save, and just like the previous step, let's rename this. Let's call it get latest iteration ID. Go back, let's hit save, and let's do the test again. So I'm just going to abandon the previous pull request, and I'm going to go in here, new pull request, call it the same, set test module 3, and before I hit create, I want to make sure my workflow is running, so click the workflow here. Let's go back and let's create the pull request. So you'll see when a new pull request is created, this workflow will get triggered. There you go. And if I open the last step, you can see it's pulling the organization name, project name, repo ID, pull request ID, and the latest iteration ID. Now that we have got the latest iteration ID in our pull request, the next step for us is to get the list of file names from the PR. So that's what we will do next. And for that, I'm going to again add a HTTP request, And I think you would have guessed by now, whenever I add a HTTP request, I'm going to make a call to the Azure DevOps REST APIs. So I'm going to select this, and the method again, it's going to be get. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste a URL here. So basically, same thing here. I'm calling a REST API. I'm passing in the organization name, project name, and I'm passing the repo ID, pull request ID, iteration ID. Okay, that's what I'm doing. And this iteration ID is what we got in the previous step. So now we can go back. Before going back, I just want to change the name here. I'm going to say get all files in PR. Okay. So once I make the name change, I'm going to go back and I'm going to hit save. And you know what I'm going to do next? Yes, you're right. I'm going to do some testing from Azure DevOps. So I'm just going to go to Azure DevOps, create a new pull request 3, and before I hit create, I just want to start my workflow. I'll come back here and click create. And now if I go to n8n, you're going to see it's going to trigger the workflow now. And if I look at the last step, okay, so I made a mistake here. I didn't select the authentication. That's why it's showing a lot of data. So let's go back and fix it. So let me go back to my editor, double click on this one, and for the authentication, select generic credential type, select Basic Auth, and then select the account that you just created. So once you do this, hit save, and let's go back and test this one. So go back here. I just want to abandon the previous one, and I'm going to create a new pull request. So click on new pull request, and you can say test module 3, and before I hit create, I want to execute my workflow. Let's go back to Azure DevOps and hit create. So now you'll see the workflow getting triggered, and if you click on the last one, now you're seeing all the change entries. So you're seeing the name of the files that's part of my pull request. So I have a C# controller, I have a SQL file called get average employees, and I have another SQL file called get employees. So those are getting pulled in here, and if you don't select the proper authentication, then you're not going to get this output. So please keep that in mind. I will see you in the next one where I'll be adding another node. So far we have got the latest iteration ID, and then using the latest iteration ID we got all the files that are in the pull request. So now the next step for us is to extract the file path from the pull request. So for that, I'm just going to click on this plus icon, and in the search node I'm going to search for code. So this is the step where we'll write some JavaScript code, like 4-line code. I'm going to show you what it is. I'll try to explain what it is as well. So we click on this, and this is what you're going to see. In here, in the mode, you can leave it as default, run once for all items, and in the language you can select JavaScript, and in here I'm going to copy paste a JavaScript code. Okay, so basically what we are saying here is we're saying that in the previous step you new pull request, and from this massive payload that we see here, I'm interested only in file path, change type, object ID, and original object ID. So this JavaScript code is going to extract only these fields from this big payload, and that is what we are going to do now. And before I go and do the test on this one, let me change the name here. I'm going to call it extract file path, and I'm going to save it. And the next step for us is to do some testing. So let's go back here. I'm going to abandon my previous test. I'm going to come here, new pull request. I'm going to say test module 3. me execute the workflow and come back here, and let's click create pull request. So at this point your workflow will be triggered and you'll get some output. So I'm going to go to the last step and see what my output is. Okay, there you go. So in here you see this JavaScript was focusing mainly on this 4 properties: file path, change type, object ID, original object ID, and that's what you see here in the output. Okay, and this is one of the steps where we use code. Most of the time we won't be using any code in this workflow. So the last node that we'll be adding to the module 3 workflow is to get the file content, right? Because as of now we got the name of the files, we extracted the file path, and the last step for us in this particular module is to get the content of each of the files that's in the pull request. So why are we doing this? In module 4 we are going to take the content of each of these files and we want to send it to our OpenAI model so that it can do the code review on the content of the file and give us feedback. So this step is very important because this will act as the input for the module 4, which is the main functionality behind this code review assistant. So for this I'm going to add a HTTP request. Yep, you guessed it right. I'm going to make a call to the REST API at this point. So the method is still get, and I'm going to copy and paste. By the way, these URLs are all in that slide that I showed you earlier, so I can put it in the description as well. So this is the URL. So again, same thing like earlier. I'm passing the organization name, project name, repo ID, file path, and also I'm passing the version, branch version here. And again, whenever you make a REST API call, you have to make sure you set the authentication. So let's go here, select generic credential type, select basic auth, and then that selects our auth user, and that should be it. So let's go back here, save it, and let's give a name for this step. That will be get file contents. Let's hit save, and then let's go back to Azure DevOps and let's do one final test on this workflow. Okay, so let's do the last test for this module, and I'm going to call it test module 3, and I will execute the workflow. And let's come back here and click on create. So you'll see the workflow trigger, and there you go. So when I click on this, you'll see exactly what's going on. This step is giving the contents of each of the files. So these are the contents of my C# controller, and this is my get employees.sql. You can see the content is the select statement I have. And in the next module, which is module 4, we are going to pass this contents to OpenAI model, and we are going to ask OpenAI to do the code review on these contents, and that will be the main key part of this video series, and you're going to see how it all spans out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next module.